Welcome back to my channel, where we explore the scariest stories from around the web. Today, we've scoured Craigslist to bring you 8 of the creepiest true stories we could find, and these stories will send shivers down your spine. Number 1. Brian Boucher thought he found the perfect match on Craigslist when John Williams agreed to share his apartment and the rent. But as time passed, Williams' behavior became increasingly strange. Williams was reclusive and would disappear into his room for long periods, causing Boucher to worry. After 10 months of living together, Boucher decided to investigate and broke into Williams' locked room. What he found chilled him to the bone. Inside, Boucher discovered a manila envelope filled with shredded credit card offers that Boucher had thrown away. Williams had also collected personal information about Boucher's family, including the date of his parents' marriage. But the most terrifying discovery was a diary entry where Williams confessed to being afraid of anyone looking at him twice on the street or a cop looking at him, thinking they knew. Boucher soon discovered that Williams was actually Dino Lawrence Smith, a jewel thief who had pulled off a heist worth $10 million in San Francisco. Williams was on America's Most Wanted list, and Boucher was lucky to have not become one of his victims. Number 2. Catherine Ann Olson had high hopes for her future as a theater actress. But before her dreams could take flight, she took on a babysitting job through Craigslist. Little did she know, the person who posted the ad, Michael John Anderson, was a twisted individual with dark desires. Anderson had always wondered what it felt like to kill someone and saw this as the perfect opportunity to find out. Posing as a mother named Amy, he lured Olson to a run-down house in Savage, Minnesota, where he shot her in the back with a .357 Magnum. After dragging her body down the stairs, he stashed it in the trunk of his car and abandoned it a few blocks away. Anderson thought he was in the clear, but he had made a fatal mistake. He had wrapped Olson's bloody phone in a towel with his name written on it and then discarded it in a public trash can. In 2009, Anderson was sentenced to life in prison without parole. But Olson's family and friends were left with the horrifying memory of a young woman's life cut short by a sadistic killer. Number 3. Jennifer Poppin was a 26-year-old prostitute in Long Island who advertised her services on Craigslist. One night in March 2010, she was contacted by 23-year-old Chad Johnson. Poppin thought it would be like any other job. They agreed on an $80 payment, and she got into his car to take care of their arrangement. But things didn't go as planned. Johnson suddenly demanded his money back, and when Poppin refused, he turned violent. He grabbed her by the throat, choking her until she was unable to breathe. Poppin struggled to scream for help, but it was too late. Johnson had already taken her life. He then drove to a wooded area near the Long Island Expressway and buried her body in a shallow grave. The investigation into Poppin's disappearance led the authorities to Johnson, who was known to have a history of assault. A background check showed that he had choked people before and had even been in trouble with the law. Johnson eventually confessed to the murder, leading the police to the shallow grave where he had buried Poppin's lifeless body. The tragic story of Poppin serves as a warning to anyone who thinks it's safe to hire a prostitute on Craigslist. The internet is full of stories of prostitutes who rob their clients, but the dangers can be much more severe than just losing some money. Number 4. Moraima Alejandra waited anxiously at the bus station in Mesa County, Colorado for her roommate, Luis Oliva, to pick her up. But he never showed up, and when she called the police, they found Oliva lying naked in a pool of his own blood. He had been brutally clubbed to death with a blunt object. Investigators discovered that Oliva had been running a male massage service on Craigslist, which led them to suspect his partner, Brandon Wathan. However, it turned out that Wathan was out of town on the night of the murder. Further investigation pointed to an Army veteran named Billy Joe DeLacy as the prime suspect. DeLacy denied any involvement at first, but then kept changing his story. He had child pornography on his computer, but he claimed he had stolen it. The investigation seemed to go on endlessly, but eventually, DeLacy was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The case was a chilling reminder of the dangers of online marketplaces and the horrific consequences that can arise from anonymous online interactions. Number 5. Scott Davis thought he had hit the jackpot when he saw the job listing on Craigslist, The ad promised $300 a week and a place to stay in a secluded farm in southeastern Ohio, a fresh start that he desperately needed after breaking up with his girlfriend. He was over the moon when he found out he was one of the finalists for the job, especially since over 100 other applicants had responded. But things took a terrifying turn when he went to meet his employer. Davis was picked up by a heavyset man named Jack, who introduced his nephew, a burly teenager, as the driver. As they drove further away from civilization, the road grew increasingly isolated. Finally, the Buick stopped on a deserted stretch of dirt road. Jack told Davis they had left some equipment down the hill and asked him to help them carry it up to the car. As they walked through the dense underbrush, Davis heard the sound of a gun cocking. Before he could react, a bullet shattered his elbow. Davis stumbled into the woods as Jack cursed and fired round after round at his back. He spent hours creeping through the woods, unsure if Jack or his accomplice would find him. After a long, terrifying night, Davis finally made it to a rural house and called the police. But it was too late for some of Jack's other victims. Jack, whose real name was Richard Beasley, had used his Craigslist ad to lure men into the woods, where he and his teenage accomplice, Brogan Rafferty, had already killed 3 men and buried their bodies in shallow graves. Beasley was sentenced to death, and Rafferty was sentenced to life in prison. The job of a lifetime turned out to be a terrifying trap that cost innocent people their lives. Number 6. Diane Warwick had a history of violence and insanity. She had robbed a pharmacy and taken a counselor hostage at gunpoint and had spent 6 years in a mental hospital. But none of this seemed to matter when she applied to be a caregiver for Mary Jane Scanlon in Pleasant Hill, California through a Craigslist ad. Scanlon was a wheelchair-bound elderly woman who needed assistance with everyday tasks. Warwick's responsibilities included helping Scanlon eat and move in and out of bed. Everything seemed fine until one day, without any warning, Warwick stabbed Scanlon to death. The police found her at a nearby trailer park, where she was arrested and later sentenced to 31 years to life in prison. During her trial, Warwick claimed that she had hallucinated that she was attacking her father when she killed Scanlon. It was a terrifying reminder that sometimes even the people we trust to take care of us can have dark and dangerous secrets lurking beneath the surface. Number 7. James Sanders thought he had found the perfect buyer for his diamond ring on Craigslist. Little did he know that this decision would lead to his family's demise. The young couple who showed interest in the ring had something else in mind when they arrived at Sanders' home in Edgewood, Washington. Once inside, the husband pulled out a gun, and 2 more armed men forced their way into the house. Sanders and his family were ordered to the ground and tied up. When one of the intruders hit Sanders' 14-year-old son with the barrel of his pistol, Sanders couldn't hold back anymore. He lunged at the man, only to be shot 3 times. Sanders bled out in front of his wife and children. The killers were later apprehended, but the damage was already done. The terror and trauma inflicted on the Sanders family would never fully heal. Number 8. Miranda Barber's life was a dark one from the beginning. She was initiated into a satanic cult at just 13 years old and had already committed her first murder. But when she was sent to live with her uncle in North Carolina, things seemed to be looking up. That is, until she met Alit Barbour, who became her husband and partner in crime. Together, they decided to find someone to kill, believing it would bring them closer together. They posted a Craigslist ad looking for a man who hated his wife and soon found Troy LaFera, a 42-year-old man who responded to the ad. They planned to kill him that very night. As Miranda waited in the front seat, Alit hid in the back, ready to strike when given the signal. When Troy arrived, Alit strangled him with a cord while Miranda stabbed him over 20 times. They dumped his body in an alley, washed the car, and went out to dinner to celebrate their horrific act. Miranda later claimed to have killed 22 people in multiple states, but her confession was met with disbelief. Nevertheless, she and Alit were arrested and sentenced for their brutal murder of Troy LaFera. All right. Online communities are full of terrifying stories like this one. Who knows what other real stories are waiting to be discovered in the depths of the internet?